Raise some
Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.
What's going on, Patriots? Welcome here. Eddie, I know you guys are all looking for Nate. Nate couldn't be here tonight, so I'm stepping in for him. And we have a great guest for you tonight on the Patriot Prayer Network here on the Raising Cain Show. Robert Morss, a.k.a. the Lego Man. Is that right? Did I get that right? Lego
That
Man?
is correct. That is correct. Thank you very much.
You got to talk about that for a second.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. No, I appreciate you having me. The story is goofy, but it has played in my favor for a number of reasons, but I'm sure we'll get to that. I'm just grateful to be on the show, and thanks for having me.
All right, brother. Well, here we got a lot to talk about. So I want to start at the beginning of this whole experience, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of us that got to see January the 6th only through the lens of a TV screen.
Mm-hmm.
And we were obviously told what they wanted us to know. And then they cherry-picked videos, hiring a Hollywood producer to comb through the footage and only show us the things that benefited the story that they wanted to get out. Now we know for sure, for certain, there were FBI informants and FBI confidential human sources and whatever else all throughout this crowd intentionally causing the problems that we were seeing. We saw people like Ray Epps agitating situations, who was not charged with anything but a misdemeanor after 2 years of the Republicans pushing for a true inquiry as to who this guy was. I've heard rumors, I'm not going to repeat, from the Gateway Pundit and other people about how the FBI might have snared him and trapped him into forcing him to do what they wanted to by certain other charges that were looming outside of the distance that most people didn't know about. I can't verify those, so I'm not going to do that. That's not the kind of journalism that we do here, but I can tell you the charges were very serious. And it did seem that here's the only guy on video, the only guy saying, you got to go into the Capitol, whispering in people's ears. They're tearing down gates. See people walking, getting handcuffed and walked through the Capitol and then taken where they think is off camera, taken out of the handcuffs, fist bumped. We have seen it all, dude. This is beyond anybody's ability to think. Like, guys, if this is true and that's true, do you understand the Lego structure we're building here, one Lego at a time?
That's great.
It's pretty wild, though. I mean, if that's really true, that means our FBI is compromised. That means that the administration is compromised. That means that there are a contingency of Americans in our intelligence communities who are compromised because nobody's coming forward and no one's saying anything. And now we're dealing with folks like yourself and many other J6ers who had their civil rights violated, people that didn't even go into the Capitol. Another friend of the show, Ryan, I forget his last name. His dad ran for Congress in it's going to come to me in a second. He was arrested based on trumped up information. The video cleared him. However, they still put him in prison for 36 months. And they moved him to the same prison in the state where his dad was so they could put him in the more dangerous federal facility because they told his dad to shut up and stop talking about it.
Wow.
And so we've seen all of these wild things occur. And while we're seeing all of these things occur, it seems as though one particular political party and those who tend to side with the deep state are the only ones on one side of this issue, ignoring facts,
Yes.
um, ignoring footage, ignoring testimony, blacking out testimony from people
Yeah.
like Kash Patel and others.
Well, it's
Um,
not just a political party, it's judges and prosecutors too.
and it has to be right. So you
Yeah.
have to have all of these people on the same page at the same time with one directive in mind, not
Mhm.
questioning the authority, just doing what they're told.
Yes.
And this tells us, what kind of country are we living in? What's really going on? The mayor in LA, with all these fires that are going on, we do a little research into her and come to find out that she has been involved with uh, going to Cuba on a monthly basis, swore her fidelity to Castro, and is part of a communist brigade that swore to overthrow America, and was a part of this group that did bombings in the United States, where her co-defendants were pardoned by Bill Clinton, but yet she's still allowed to hold office in our country when she swore fidelity to another country to tear this one down. And this seems to be the kind of thing where it's like we're living in a culture where it is admonished to burn our flag, tear down our monuments, spit on our history, hide our heritage,
Yeah.
and repackage America to make it sound like it's something that it's not. And it does seem like there is an outside force over above us that's doing this, that's pulling the strings. But
Completely.
your perspective, what do you see? What have you experienced? Take us back to January the 6th and tell us how your day started.
Sure. Well, just in reference to what you just said, though, too, I wish I could say that I was surprised by the news about this California mayor, but sadly, I'm not. I think as Americans, our kindness has been mistaken for weakness, but then again, perhaps they're one and the same. And
Yes.
we'll get into that in the book, in a minute. But to take you back to January 6th, I did not show up for Donald Trump as much as most people would like to say or recite.
Mhm.
Though he was a contributing factor, I think I got really passionately involved to a higher degree than ever before after watching the hypocrisy of 2020, about watching our cities burn down and statues get taken down
Yeah.
and everybody rioting, to try to, I guess, destroy America. And yet you were told not to go to mom and pop shops, small businesses, because those were going to be super spreader events.
Yes, exactly
You
right.
can scream at the top of your lungs, F the police, but then when you go into church, you have to wear a mask. So the hypocrisy was unbounded, and it obviously seemed to be targeting the middle class, which, as we know, communism needs to eradicate, so that there can be a enormous divide between the haves and have-nots. And so I saw this as a playbook from Saul Alinsky's Rules for
Well, for
Radicals,
radical, yes.
and that's also referenced in the book that we'll get to in a minute. But I mean, that became evidently clear to me, and that's just the riots. We're not even talking about the vaccine mandates yet. We're not even talking about the lies about where the Wuhan lab stuff and everything like that came from. Once that started coming out, and then the Hunter Biden laptop stories getting covered, it just became so abundantly clear that we were not in control as we were supposed to be as American citizens of our government, and the government was running us off the cliff
Mhm.
and getting us out of the way. And so, for Trump to have the brazen audacity that he normally has, but to have been challenged by, maintaining an enormous campaign throughout it all, and then packing stadiums and fields and everything like that with patriots, showed us two things. One, that the pandemic was not as effective as they had hoped to corral the American people, because some of us could see through the nonsense. But then
Yep.
on top of that, too, that this country was worth saving and that there was a chance to actually save it. And then we get to November 3rd. I watched those numbers flip, man. I watched Trump's lead get completely handed to Biden, the guy who never came out of his basement and slurred
Yep.
his way through every speech, and then
Sure
on
enough.
camera admitted that they had put together the most extensive voter fraud team in American politics, which also is quoted in the book. So here I am thinking, like, oh my gosh, like, where do we live anymore? Like, what
Right.
happened to the country that I was told that I was born into? Because my
Mhm.
grandparents knew what freedom was. I watched 9/11 when I was in the third grade. So I don't know if I've ever really truly understood what freedom was supposed to ever be like. I've grown up
Right.
in the surveillance state, but I know it ain't this. And so
That's
after
that's
that
exactly
happened,
right. That's
Yeah, when
exactly
after
right.
that happened, man, I really couldn't stand it. I went to the first Stop the Steal rallies that were held nationwide at every capital. Then I watched the Jericho rallies and the Million MAGA marches get extremely violent, where Trump supporters were getting stabbed, beat up, jumped, firebombed, you name it, throughout DC. And so when Donald Trump accepts the invitation to the Stop the Steal rally at the Capitol, mind you, he didn't plan it. He accepted an invitation, which is very important. It's something that they leave out. And again, we get to in the book, a guy named Ali Alexander put all that together, which you never hear about. But anyways, when he accepted the invitation and invited the American people, I thought to myself, you know what? When on earth has the commander in chief asked his people to show up to support him? Normally it's the other way around, you know, but no, this man is actually begging his people to come and show up in arms. I have no other choice. I'm going. Not only that, he's my commander in chief. And so it was a big deal for me. You know, obviously Trump was a contributing factor, but you know, the fact that Congress was willing to spend our taxpayer dollars on COVID relief for Nicaragua, like, give me a break. I don't live in Nicaragua. I live here.
Right.
I didn't volunteer to die for Nicaragua. I volunteered to die for America.
Right. Yeah.
So
We
it's
just recently gave $1 billion to Angola because of the floods that occurred in Africa. While we still have people that don't even have houses
in
in
North
the southeast
Carolina.
following the hurricane.
Most
And they
people don't even
told
know where
me,
Angola is on a map.
I couldn't find it, but I can tell you this: the Amish people went down there and showed
I
up. And
know it.
thank you, shout out to the Amish, because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have taken
Yes.
Pennsylvania. And they showed up,
Agreed.
and they're still showing up in North Carolina, building homes. They've
Yes.
raised over $300,000, and you know the government stepped in and told them to stop. Like what?
Wow.
What do you mean stop? They said no. Here's the thing about people that have a conviction from God: you can't intimidate them.
No.
You
Because
cannot intimidate because they're
because
ready to die.
the authority that they're responding to is higher than government. And that's
That's
why
exactly right.
communism always wants to eradicate religion,
Bingo.
is because the state would prefer to be God. And that's what's slowly happening here in America, is that the last three generations or whatever have been coddled into hating
Yep.
their national heritage, hating
Yep.
their own soil, hating their own people, and not even knowing that the love of Christ exists. And
Yep.
so we're catching this thing right at the 11th hour. And if you think about it, that's when every good story really takes place. You know, like I'm a huge nerd, so I love the Lord of the Rings, and they literally saved the day right before the bad guy took over. You know what I mean? But
Right.
that's how every good story goes. Is like we were on the brink of annihilation, and we yanked the reins back, and I think that we are going to save this country. I'm confident. I think that God gave us a second chance that we didn't deserve with the election of Donald Trump. That's his third election that he won, by the way, in my opinion. But I will tell you, you know, to try to answer your question, I'm sorry that, you know, I weaved a little bit
Oh,
like
you're
Trump
good.
normally
You're
does in
good.
his
You're good.
speeches.
Yeah, he uses that word too. He uses
Yeah,
that
using
word,
the
that weed
weave,
word,
the
the weave. Excuse me,
weave.
but I can bring it right back to I can take a wide weave and
Yeah,
come
well,
back.
watch me do it. Watch me do it.
It's a beautiful weave. Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So this is my beautiful weave back to January 6th. So I'm there with 2 million patriots, and it is like a political Woodstock. Okay, there were people in costume, there were people with instruments, there were people singing and dancing with their flags, and you name it. And everybody from all over the planet was there because we thought that our election was going to be saved. And we were concerned about the future of our country.
As you
You
should
know,
be.
yeah, I mean, as an American, you definitely should be. And so I listened to the entirety of Trump's speech, and I'm not going to lie, I was a little let down because I anticipated that he was going to say, here's the results, here's the evidence, we got him, it's over, folks, you know, but that wasn't the case. And so kind of bummed out. I had to walk in the direction of the Capitol because that's where I was gonna, you know, return back to my ride from. And as
Okay.
I approached the Capitol, you know, I'm noticing people are running in that direction. I'm like, why are people running to the Capitol? That's kind of strange. Because there had already been a crowd that was, you know, migrating that way. And then I started to hear fireworks, or at least what I thought were fireworks. I'm like, why are they shooting fireworks? I mean, maybe Mike Pence did do the right thing and he decided to send the votes back, but it's way early. You can't see him. It's overcast, you know. And then as I got even closer, I realized, oh, those are not fireworks. I recognize
Mhm.
those noises. Those are flashbangs. And so, you know, to try to simplify things, I watched the pro Trump Asian American group that had showed up in mass and were handing out NCCP flyers the day prior, or excuse me, moments prior, get targeted, and their women and children and old folks had flashbangs detonate right at their face, which was intentional. And, you know, we already talked about how I was wearing the same uniform that I deployed to Afghanistan 3 times in on combat deployments as a Airborne Ranger that day. And so the attire, the condition, the rage that had been built up and I believe was designed, you know, from the entire year leading up to that point, all kicked in,
They
and it was
were
a perfect storm.
antagonizing us intentionally. I believe that with all my heart.
Oh, completely. I've seen the videos, but I was honestly there. I mean, and that was the craziest part about it was here we were the party, we were the group of people that was saying back the blue. You know, we support the police.
Mhm.
You know, we reject the lie that all cops are bad and everything like that for all of 2020. And then here I am with that in my heart, and I watch a police officer shield bash an old lady in the face. I'm thinking, where am I? And so, and this is kind of funny, but this happened multiple times in my court proceedings where the judge referenced what I said that day, where I asked police officers in the middle of the I guess, bar fight, if you will, that happened on the Capitol steps. I asked the police, how much did they pay you to betray your country? And I wish I could ask that to people like Nancy Pelosi and Liz Cheney and Chuck Schumer, all of them, because January 6th was a lobster trap. It was a setup. And the more video evidence surfaces, the more we can confirm that without having been there at all.
Well, Nancy Pelosi betrayed herself when the video finally made its way out into, you know, the mainstream press, which is I will consider as X at this point.
At this
Because
point,
the mainstream media never picked it up and ran with it, but
they couldn't.
she admitted in the back of that limo that the buck stops with her. Now, Kash Patel and others finally were able to be given a voice because their all of their testimony was redacted from the January the 6th committee, the what we call unselect committee. And
Yes.
now we're talking about putting Liz Cheney, you know, in prison for manipulating
As she
the.
should be. As she
I mean,
should be.
If she truly manipulated people, if she met with them through secret websites, like they're saying, like our friend Tim Burchett the other day said from Tennessee, Congressman Tim Burchett, yes, she should be held to the same standard that you and I were, because if they had gotten their way, they were willing to put Donald Trump away for life.
Oh, yeah.
And they wanted to very, very badly. Then you saw
they have always wanted to kill him.
Yeah, these people, I mean, just look at Alvin Bragg said there was nothing here to bring charges against Trump.
Yep.
Then this guy from the State Department goes from the State Department out to New York, and the next thing you know, they bootstrap this charge to that charge and come up with a whole nother one because one was beyond the statute of limitations.
Yep.
They couple it with some campaign financing stuff that they kind of invented, and now Donald Trump is going to court on 34 counts of fraud. Yeah. And then Mershon gives the jury instructions prior to deliberation and changes those instructions to what's called a 444 rule. For those of you who don't understand what that means, is that they don't have to agree. If you and I were charged with 34 counts of a crime, each count would have to be defined as to what the count was and what it entailed. And am I guilty or innocent of that particular thing?
Of each individual charge.
Of each individual charge. Donald Trump was not afforded that same privilege. Donald Trump.
Right. That's right.
It's right. That's exactly right. It is a right. Mm-hmm. He was not given that. Instead, what they did was decide that all they had to do was decide that there was a crime, a very vague generality, not defined by the count itself. And so what you came out of that with was every time someone agreed or 4 people disagreed, you didn't have to have a unanimous decision, and they were able to say he was guilty of that crime.
Right.
Then you come to find out that the judge's daughter worked for the Biden-Harris campaign and had received millions of dollars. When they asked for a change of venue to replace the judge himself got to decide whether or not to stay or go. So he got to make his own decision here, which I always thought was a weird thing, because there should be some type of criteria in which you can appeal such decision, because this was in my take, and I believe I'm correct, this was a very targeted effort concerted effort on the part of the Democrats to target their political opponent,
Without a doubt.
and they benefited, and a judge that benefits from the opposition of the guy who's standing in front of him makes him your enemy as well. This is a bad look.
Oh, it's terrible.
The Democrats shouldn't have even wanted this look. If they were truly doing what was right and good for the people, they should have wanted to be beyond any shadow of any doubt. And then you continue that with Jack Smith, who had cases turned over by the Supreme Court, who had his hand slapped already and was damn near disbarred. And then you get the most corrupt attorney in the United States. You don't appoint him by committee. You don't affirm him, and yet you allow this guy to be the one who charges
to run the show.
And people don't understand this, and they come out and you read it online all the time in these accounts, I believed, that are paid for by people to come online and post these weird things like, why did you vote for a rapist? Donald Trump didn't rape anyone.
No. And in fact, he won that case.
Yes,
because Stephanopoulos dropped that, and then the mainstream media ate it up and regurgitated it, like what they do with their entire spin. And Donald Trump had to have Stephanopoulos apologize and got money for it, but the mainstream media won't. They're not going to walk this stuff back. So many things that you said make me want to like run to the hills with the topic. But what I will say is that, what happened in Georgia and New York and everything like this, it reminds me of the Steele dossier. It reminds me of the Russian collusion hoax. It reminds me of how
Hurricane,
everything. And so their playbook, we're honestly getting used to at this point. But as I mentioned in the book, and I guess I'll start talking about it now because you've mentioned so many things that are in there already. In the book that a brother of mine and I, Kelly Meggs, wrote in the Philadelphia Detention Center in 2023.
Who is Kelly Meggs? Just so we all.
He is the leader of the Oath Keepers chapter out of Florida.
Okay.
And he and I put this book together. It's called One Question Remains. Got smuggled out of prison. Now available on Amazon. We walked the reader back all the way to 2016, and when Bernie Sanders got kicked out of the DNC as the Democratic nominee. And we established that as the precursor for what to expect about the Democrat Party moving forward all the way up to, January 6th. But, so many things that we reference about, the Steele dossier, the Russian collusion hoax, the pandemic, and all the things in between that lead up to January 6th. Should it surprise your audience that all of these names keep popping up? Should it surprise the audience that this is what they do? And here's another thing that, bringing it back to January 6th. See, I'm weaving here. Oh, there it is. Weaving it back to January 6th, there is almost a model for this type of behavior. And for as much as the Democrats want to call Trump Hitler and call the MAGA movement Nazis, I want your audience to go look up what the Reichstag fires are, because we talk about it in One Question Remains, but in 1933, event at the legislative building that got blown way out of proportion, that a mainstream media turned into a national emergency event, got the wrong man elected and held the wrong party accountable. But guess what? Adolf Hitler was the man that got elected, and the Nazi Party was the one that won, and the wrong party was held responsible for an event at the legislative building. It's almost carbon copy of what happened on January 6th.
And 9/11.
And well, you see, check this out. So they have the same playbook. It's deception, it's sacrifice, it's calculated risk. And that is how me and Kelly Meggs got together to write this book in the first place. We're sitting there playing chess one day in the prison cell that we shared. And, he beats me in chess more than I'd like to admit, but I'd get him every once in a while. But here we are, and it's almost like a light bulb went over both of our heads, which we do believe was God letting us know that we need to do this. But we recognize that January 6th was a chess move. Sacrifice and deception is one of many, and that's why the image that you see on the cover of One Question Remains has a superimposed image of a pawn inside the Capitol, which I'm sure you'd appreciate. But that is the whole thing that we tried to elaborate to the greater audience, is that not only was this a lobster trap because it just makes sense after everything that they've done from 2016 and on up, but we can confirm this for you. Something that I like to spoil for, maybe some of your listeners and readers is that, why on earth does a former CIA agent who's got a radio show called Sputnik Radio have the hotel receipts and flight tickets of a Ukrainian Azov brigade team that was present in January 6th and disguised amongst the crowd.
Well, hold it right there so I can explain that regime. So people understand that the Azov regime would literally Nazis, right? They dress in
Mhm.
Nazi regalia. They wear the swastika patch on their uniform. They are the brigade that is responsible for killing their own citizens, who they claim are their own citizens in the Donbass region. They were the ones going in there and slaughtering their own citizens, which this is what brought on portion anyway, what brought on the Ukraine incident. And none other than Vladimir Zelensky was actually a part of that as well. So when people like to say that, well, he's Jewish, he couldn't be a Nazi. Well, I put it to you that so was Hitler.
Mm.
So you have to do your research and understand that
Yes.
those people in the Donbass region term themselves to be ethnic Russians. They did not want to be part of Ukraine, and therefore there was some ethnic cleansing going on in that area. And also we had moved NATO much closer than what we previously agreed. So that kicked that all off. But I did not know they had anything to do with
Yes.
January the 6th. So please continue.
Yeah, so that's one of many things that we elaborate in the book. One question remains. Another thing that, so we spend a lot of time explaining things that we know for a fact. For example, we know for a fact that after Ted Cruz and Congressman from Arizona both vote that we have no confidence in the Electoral College results and that we would like to send the electors back, that was kind of like the trigger met, if you will, for the confirmation that January 6th had to go down. So the minute that happens, Nancy Pelosi leaves the joint session of Congress, okay, and that very moment that happens, at the exact same timestamp, a red smoke grenade goes off above the crowd, and that's when everything becomes violent. That timing doesn't add up unless it was all calculated. And so we make the argument that the Electoral College certification ceremony, it's not an official proceeding, ceremony needed to be halted at all costs, and they were willing to do anything to make sure that happened. And what better way to do it than to stop it with Donald Trump's own people so that he could be ruined from politics and the MAGA movement could be killed forever. But what they didn't calculate was that the sloppier that they did this job, the more Americans like you and your audience would pick up on this, and that would infuriate them. And it all backfired. Here we are. Like, the Democrat Party will not recover from this, because now not only the party of the KKK and slavery, but now they're the party of stolen elections and coups and insurrections.
Yeah, so much so that they actually went into Rudy Giuliani's home.
Yep.
And raided his home in hopes of finding some data they could use against his client. I mean, this is really what they do in Russia. This is really what they do in these Baltic nations, is that they go after your attorneys and this is exactly what Donald Trump has endured. The only man to actually lose money by becoming president. Right. The only man to have all of his friends and his family targeted, to have his buildings bombed, just like what happened out here at the Trump Tower a few days back. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But the reality of it is that Donald Trump has accomplished everything that you can accomplish in the world of business, and had, I believe with all my heart, just wants to have a legacy to leave behind, to be among the James Madisons, Thomas Jeffersons, and so forth. He wants to be named among those. So that's the legacy that he wants to leave, a resurgence of the American exceptionalism that we used to take pride in our flag.
Yes.
We used to take pride in our history. Now we have things like the 1619 Project and all of these DEI initiatives that have made us less safe, less powerful, more susceptible to outside influence. We are putting a culture of death on our children and in our communities. And we're told that if we question it, we're bigots, we're hateful, we're judgmental.
This is why I was okay with being the lone Republican in the Democrat infested school departments throughout America. The Department of Education is loaded with radicals and leftists and liberals and you name it, communists. But anyways, I didn't mind being that guy because I was willing to go in there and be a real teacher and teach real history to these students, not
So
from the
you're a
desk.
history teacher. I didn't know this.
Yes. Okay. So
Okay.
that's how things develop. So when I got out of the Army, I used my GI Bill to go to Penn State and got my second education degree,
Mhm.
and for 6 months I was a high school history teacher, and they
Now, were you
arrested
there
me on the
during the
last day
Biden
of
pin?
school.
Were you there during the Biden pin deal?
Oh, I don't. I was not there for that.
Okay.
But what I will tell you is
Mhm.
this: that on my first deployment to Afghanistan is when I decided to become a high school history teacher because as I was walking around the bombed out areas of Sharana, Afghanistan, and as I was seeing that our country could become that, and it really tore me up. Seeing people being treated like cattle, seeing I mean, just a country that knows nothing but devastation and tyranny. They have no concept of individual sovereignty or God-given rights. I
The women
recognize
are
that.
treated like trash. They're not allowed to
Yes,
read.
yes,
They're not allowed to talk to other men. They can't go shopping by themselves. They
yes.
get beaten by the authorities just for going out to get vegetables in a snowstorm.
Yes. And so
Um,
where's the feminist outcry against that?
well,
But what I
first of
what
all,
I
we
will
need to be able to
say,
say what a woman is before they can be feminists.
I know. Well, what I will say is that I realize that my country will become this if the next generation didn't know how to keep this republic. And so
Yep.
that's when I dedicated my entire adult life to becoming a high school history teacher. That's when I dove into our founding documents and try to understand the motivations and the principles that made us the greatest country on earth. And we still are. We're just a little misguided right now. But at that point in time, I realized that I wasn't going to reenlist. I knew that I could make more of an impact in the classroom than I could with my M4. And I think that's honestly why I did as much time as I did, because my charges were not nearly as severe or crazy as some of these other people that were either at the Capitol or were willing to desecrate federal property like that they did in Oregon or Seattle or during the Hamas protests or anything of that nature. But they hated the fact that I love this country enough that I can even be betrayed by it and still endure and still love it and still want to do
Mhm.
right by it.
Mhm.
And so, as a teacher, this is my attempt to try to fix history with the book, to fix history with introducing young African American kids to the first Black patriot like Peter Salem, who was literally a freed slave standing side by side with white men on Lexington and Concord and was willing to gun down everybody at the first engagement that kicked off the Revolutionary War, because not only did he want to liberate himself from bondage, but also liberate the 13 colonies from bondage of overall tyranny from Great Britain. And he believed that he could do both with his patriotism. And if we taught, young Black men about Peter Salem, instead of these whack jobs that hate America, you'd have more patriotism and more heroism and more courage within
Mhm.
every single demographic in America. And they know that, and that's why they hate our
Yeah.
history, and that's why they're trying to do everything they can to change it. But it's our responsibility to say no. And that's why me and Kelly Meggs were so motivated to put as much history as we could in
Yeah.
this book, One Question Remains. It's a
Well,
little
there's
library.
a plenty. There's plenty to draw from. Benjamin Banneker, Thurgood Marshall. There are many good people throughout history to draw from,
Oh, without a
but yet
doubt.
they draw from the most radical of the radical, and then still misrepresent the movement somehow to steer children's minds in the way of Marxism and fascism and socialism by telling them they're owed something instead of this country being established in such a way to give the individual the ability, rather the opportunity, to
Yes.
become whatever it is they want to become, versus equity, which promises an outcome, which
Right.
creates a whole nother victim class because your merit no longer counts for anything. And as somebody in the
Exactly.
military, I'm sure you know how the military has been infected with such policies as well. We are
Yes.
in a day and an age where our military is having a very hard time recruiting because they
Well, it's
immediately started with all the wokeness
Yeah, well,
following.
that started with Obama's administration. He got rid of actual savage American war fighters. He got rid of the guys that had been in the trenches for decades. He got rid of the guys that said, "No, I will not fire on American citizens." He got rid of all of them, and he was willing to infest our military with communists. He was willing
He
to
bombed
infest our
American citizens.
military.
He bombed American citizens overseas.
Yes. And so, yeah, he executed them. And so, what I will say when it comes to our military is that there's so many young men and women that are willing to lay down their life for a cause that they believe, um, that I am honored to call myself brothers and sisters with. But yes, there is a cancer within it, but it doesn't have to last. All it takes is people to be courageous enough to stand their ground. It was atrocious to see that people were willing to leave the military, or I guess would have to leave the military because they were forced to getting the vaccine, the coronavirus vaccine. That's sinister. That's crazy. And no, I know that I got a lot of vaccines in order for me to go to Afghanistan, but I also volunteered for that stuff. And there was a reason behind it. If an anthrax bomb goes off of Pittsburgh, I'm going to survive because of the crazy stuff that I was injected with to go over to Afghanistan. But to get a vaccine when it hasn't even, been approved long enough by the public that this actually works, we're just going to ram it down our throats because, Fauci says it's okay. Meanwhile, and we go to that in great detail in the book as well. It was terrible that our military of all people had to suffer because the only reason why we're not being invaded by 9 different countries right now is because brave men and women are willing to do savage deeds in the dark. To quote Winston Churchill,
Oh, we are being invaded right
we're
now. We
definitely
have
being invaded.
30 some million people, probably, in my estimation, in the United States. The day after, well, on New Year's Day, we had a total of, I think it was about 13 different incidents.
How
And
disgusting is that?
even more in the days following. So, and we don't know the truth about any of them because they've created this aura of people don't know who to trust.
Right.
They don't know what to trust. They don't know if the emails that came out after the Sean Ryan show that were talked about in detail with Sam Shoemate and others was that another misdirection. I mean, people are just flooded with so much misdirection, misinformation, and malinformation. They don't know where to turn and
And
what
do
to
you know
believe.
that that's also a communist tactic? So in East Germany, this is a Stasi playbook where they would put out so much misinformation so that you didn't know who to trust, you didn't know who to talk to, and you didn't know who was an informant.
Yep.
I mean, like the stats were like
The
1 out of
brown
5 or
shirt.
2 out of 5 people were gonna rat on you in your own family, even. So your daughter could end up running to the state and turn you in, and you end up
You're
getting sent
referring
to
to
Siberia.
the Hitler Youth,
It's
correct?
insane. Well,
Yeah.
not only that, it's a playbook out of totalitarianism,
Mhm.
and all of these
They
roads
had
lead back there.
they had the brown shirts, Antifa, the real Antifa,
Yes, the black
and
bloc.
in the Hitler Youth. Well, what they don't understand is once Hitler took power, what happened to the brown shirts? They were useful idiots. They all got
Yep.
lined up and they were all murdered.
Yep.
And that's exactly what these people don't realize they are right now is they are useful idiots.
They're loose
They
ends that are going to be clipped very soon.
very much so. And all the Democrat Party and those radicals on the left that
Yeah.
are there, and on the right as well, Liz Cheney, Paul Ryan, Mitt Romney, Mitch McConnell, and many others who Dick Cheney, more than we probably know, more than probably who showed their faces and took their masks off and stepped to the left of that false left side, that wall that we used to believe existed. That
Right.
separated the two political
The
classes.
uniparty. The
The
uniparty.
uniparty, and that's
Yes.
exactly what we saw happen. So when we saw Dick Cheney come out and support Kamala, and we saw George Bush fail to endorse Trump, and we knew exactly what that was.
Yep.
We knew that they weren't changing their minds; they just had to take their masks off because this
Yes.
MAGA thing had went so far. They're like, we're going to lose if we all don't step out and do something radical.
Yep.
Like start backing the Democrat that we have pretended all these years that we're
To
different.
hate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so to answer your question, about how all of these things are falling into place, and I think it really boils down to the fact that if you're going to base your tactics and the way that you live off of a lie, we can follow this through history to the chief of liars and the chief of usurpers, which was Satan himself. And so I think that if you have to try to gain power based off of deception and intimidation and coercion, you're clearly not on the side of righteousness. You know,
Mhm.
there's a reason why Jesus proclaims that he is the way, the truth, and the life, because
Right.
those three things are completely negated when you sell your soul to the devil. And I believe that a lot of these people have. There's no other way to legitimize what we're seeing now. If you're going to stand on the side that is advocating for the genitalia of children to be
To be
removed from
mutilated. Yeah.
them, there's no way that you can stand on the side of mass abortions and call yourself a Christian. You cannot be a Christian and a Democrat anymore. And I'll tell you this, you can't even call yourself a patriot and a Democrat, because there's no difference between a Democrat and a communist at this point in time. So abandon ship now if you really don't believe in that stuff, or hold your peace forever, because Jesus also says that he didn't come to bring peace. He came to
A
divide.
sword.
He brings a sword.
Yeah.
And a sword cuts through the BS, man. And that's what's happening right now. This stuff is being exposed because you can't, just like Johnny Cash says, what's done in the dark will be brought to the light. And so you are now seeing who took the deal, who was willing to take their 20 pieces of silver. And you can't hide the fact that when you want to follow Christ, yes, it will be initially difficult, but also, as we're reminded in the Gospels, that
You got to be a
if
strong person. This is not an easy walk.
well, if the world hates you, remember that the world
They
hated
hated him
Jesus
first.
first.
Yep.
Yes.
They hated
And
him
so we
first.
shouldn't be surprised as if something strange were happening to us. The whole family of believers is going through the exact same thing. And this is something, to weave the book back in. That's how we end it, is we try to remind our readers is that not only is this a battle of good and evil, but we're supposed to take courage, because not only is America founded on Judeo-Christian values, but this is something that maybe not many people have heard of until now.
Mhm.
Before we declared independence from Britain, the 13 colonies recognized that there had to be a reformation movement within the colonies so that we could be capable of independence. So what's happening right now with the revival and everything like that, that happened in the 1750s, because people wanted to sever their ties from Great Britain back then. But they also realized that, man, what if we sever our ties, but we become the very thing that we swore to declare independence from? Let's make sure that doesn't happen. Let us declare independence from sin, so that we can even handle declaring independence from tyranny. And that's exactly what happened, brother. And I think that's exactly what's happening now. We're in a
Yeah.
250-year-old time loop.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we're back where we started. We became the country that we fought to leave, right? The
Yes.
overtaxation, people forgetting their
Yes.
roots about what this country was intended to be versus what it ended up being. Look, we started a revolution, a war over a 2% tax on a breakfast beverage. How
Yep.
many times is your dollar taxed now when you first get it, when you live, when you die, when you breathe, when you just existing? How many times are you taxed? And yet
Right.
here we go with Americans standing up for American things, not saying things that are outlandish, just saying things that our grandfather said. But it only takes a few generations to be educated in a certain way. A few generations, not
Yep.
many, just a
Yep.
few. And it is a hard virus to get rid of.
I think it was
Communism.
Abraham Lincoln that said something to the effect of that what's preached in the classrooms in one generation will be what's preached in politics in the next. And
Mm.
so Abraham Lincoln knows for a fact that education is the way to either kill a country or to avenge it and reform it
And
and
this is
and
exactly why
confirm it.
Jimmy Carter probably created the Department of Education to begin
Bingo.
with, because we have went from the smartest country in the world to like ranked like 26th or 27th in a very
Yes.
short period of time. And when Doge started talking about getting rid of the Department of Education and giving the power and the money back to the states instead of an unelected federal bureaucracy, people lost their minds. That,
Yes.
and it's a really sad ordeal to think that an unelected bureaucracy is needed to get rid of the unelected bureaucracy. Trump only
Yeah.
gets to choose 3,000 people and appoint them. So you only have 3,000 positions within the government that answer to the president. So most of the laws, like, or I'll give you, for instance, the Minnesota flag. The Minnesota flag changed into a Muslim flag, which is very similar to the flag of Somalia. It was done by an unelected committee appointed by Tim Walz himself, Mr. Tiananmen Square. And so what people didn't know was that that flag and the symbolism on that flag was all Muslim. And then after the unelected committee changed that flag, he went about putting a law in place to allow the Islam call to prayer to be played through loudspeakers 5 times a day throughout Minnesota. Now, that same thing has happened in multiple other cities.
Yes.
And we've actually linked the Answer Coalition, which is a pro-Palestinian group, to many of the high school renaming. We've linked some of it back to the Confucius Institutes, which renamed themselves, like the one in Utah that renamed itself to the Helen Foster Foundation because we outlawed Confucius Institutes and Chinese police stations within the United States to reclaim or go after their own dissidents on
How
US
crazy
soil.
is that on
But
U.S.
this
soil?
is what's really happening. And
Yes.
because the truth sounds so crazy,
Mhm.
people are
When you hear
unwilling
it
to believe
first,
it.
when you hear it first.
People are unwilling. The truth is stranger than fiction, and
Yes.
and I believe it's going to get even stranger. We were talking to
It
Tim
will.
Burchett, like I said, the day before yesterday, and he gave us one of the stories of finding underwater vessels that are upwards of 100 feet traveling at over 200 miles per hour underwater. Here's an elected official saying these things are happening, and we don't
Wow.
know what's going on. We got drones, or what they wanted to bring the attention to the drones, but there were other things
Oh,
that
without a
were
doubt.
flying
Without a
over
doubt.
the East Coast, and it just seemed to me they wanted all the focus on the drones and
It's always misdirection. It's
misdirection.
always deception. And again, that's why we figured that the chess board, that the chess move was such a crucial thing to try to invoke people to want to take a second look at not only just the cover of the book, but what could be inside. Because once you start to link all these events together, we're big fans of movies like The Matrix or Viva Vendetta, where you start to realize that what the government or what you have been told was totally wrong and or backwards and flipped.
Yeah,
And it's the responsibility of the truth seekers to try to withdraw the next man in line so that they too
right.
can understand freedom. And that's the whole archetype of Morpheus. He's not the chosen one, but he's going to do everything in his power to find that chosen one, and he's willing to die for it. And I think that, when it comes to Americans, our chosen ones, if you will, is our children.
Yeah.
That's the one that God chose for us to be the stewards of. And so if we care about this country, we have to do everything within our power to not just protect them, but to educate them. There's never been a bigger war on the youth in America than now. The drag queen story hour stuff is disgusting. How did
Yep.
that even become a thing without people getting shot? I'm serious.
Well,
And
here's the thing: if you're a man on a constitutional level that likes to dress in women's clothing, bro, have at it. I'm
you know
not
what
going
they
to tell
call
you how
that
to
in
dress.
prison? They call him a chomo, though.
Right? Believe me, I know. And here's the thing: the problem is that if you and I wanted to go into a classroom and talk about Christ, absolutely not. Would have no part of it.
Would have hell to pay.
Exactly right. But this you would allow into your classrooms, and not to mention in 39 states, it is perfectly legal to show pornography to children in the classroom, the same pornography that you and I would get arrested if we showed to a child outside of school grounds.
Right. That's a
So
good point.
we see this happening. It's an assault on these children. We're turning innocent children. I wonder why our anxiety and depression levels and stress levels for these kids, and they don't know how to, because they're not treated like children anymore. You're telling them things that some adults don't know. You're exposing them to things that they'll probably never see, and you're confusing them. And then you're putting things on TV to glorify it, like Jazzy and whatnot, like where they're these reality TV shows and social media. So the kid's mind never turns off. It's never, hey, put the phone down. It's dinner time. Sit with the family. What's going on in your life? What's parents need to take? I fault the schools. Don't get me wrong, but parents do need to take responsibility.
They need to
There's
rise up.
no
Yes.
getting this country back to where it needs to be without absolute intentionality.
And I
You
will say
have to
this
have
too, to piggyback on your point, my friend, there is no family without the father figure, and there's no father
right.
figure without the man. And so, and this is coming from man to man talk right now. Men gotta step up.
Yeah,
Men have to
masculinity is
put,
not toxic.
not at all, but we need to have Christian masculinity. The type of Christian masculinity that was willing to put their foot down and draw a sword and say, not in this house.
Not
You
in this
know,
house. Right.
and so, and it takes that type And, I really don't like the way that churches have been kind of toned down to the point where now, in order to be like some kind of humble man, you got to also be a coward or a wimp.
Yeah,
You got to
yeah.
think.
You can't say
Not,
that's right or that's wrong because you may
mm,
hurt someone's feelings.
nope.
Marxism has infected the church in America.
Yes, yes. And you know
We
what? Political
we don't
correctness
see.
comes from Russia,
That's
and
right.
political correctness comes from Russia. But I'll tell you what, the truth isn't politically correct.
It's just the truth.
It's just the truth, and that's why Jesus says he is the truth. How amazing is that? You
It,
can't go around it.
You can't go around it. There is no way to come at the truth except for a very matter of fact.
Right.
A
So,
woman has a place in the family. A
without a
man has a
doubt.
place in the family. A man has a place in the church. A woman has a place in the church. But if they occupy the same place at the same time, you get what's called chaos.
Yes.
And then you end up with our dysfunctional families. You end up with children that don't have that balanced life because mom is more dad than mom,
Yep.
and dad is more mom than dad. There was a perfect thing that my co-host put on X the other day, where a 4-year-old went out to a store with his mom and had picked up a pink book bag, and the dad has a fit. Said, absolutely not. He's not wearing a pink book bag to school. And this post, I think, got around 26, 27 million hits, and he just got attacked for putting it out there. But it was a perfect example of how they take and they focused on the color of the book bag instead of the deeper meaning behind why the dad had an issue. What's a pink book bag? The color pink's not going to do anything, but the societal impact to detract away from the masculinity and stop a
Yes.
man from raising a man and
Right.
directing him down that path and
Right.
telling him there's nothing wrong with it. What you've just done is remove the barrier between him and manhood to where
Yes.
there are no absolutes. You can
Yes.
do anything, be anything. Nothing is no longer absolute. And
Right.
that's what we live. We live in a day and age of moral relativism where people
Yes.
are afraid to take a stand. Well, we are not going to be those people. I don't believe you're going to be those people. One of those
No.
people. Now, what are your plans beyond prison? You're in a halfway house right now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. So I have a granddad who I will say is one of the major sources of the reasons why I think and believe the way that I do, who's losing his marbles. He's getting up there in age. And so the first thing I'm doing once I'm pardoned on the 20th is going back home to Reno, Nevada, and I'm seeing my granddad before he forgets who I am. And then after that, I'm going to see a couple more grandparents. I have a little bit of a pilgrimage to make because I have so many people in America that have risen up to support me and have my back that I need to shake their hands because 90% of them I haven't even met yet. That's the crazy thing is America really had my back. When the media wanted to, call me, a marauding insurrectionist, and the president wanted to call me a domestic terrorist, America called me a patriot. And that was wild to be in between
Can't
such a
suppress the
divide.
truth. You
You can't
cannot
suppress
suppress
the
the truth.
truth. But so I have those people to thank. I want to go back to school. I want to get my doctorate. I think that out of all the things that I've learned, I need a bigger classroom, to fit it all into. So I think I'm gonna get my doctorate. One Question Remains will not be the last book that will have my name on it. But I don't know where this road's gonna lead me. I know that the spiritual gift that I've been given is teaching, because I love the image of somebody, regardless of age, with eye contact with you, when their eyes widen because they've heard something that is going to change their life for the better forever. I'm addicted to that. And I want to keep doing that until I'm in the grave, man. And the best way to do that is to not only proclaim the gospel and how it has improved my life radically to the point where now I know that I'm going to be a good father and I know I'm going to be a good husband. And one of the greatest goals in my life is to be able to proudly say, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. But on top of that, my house is going to be in America. And I want America as a nation to say that too, not because it was submission, not because it was coercion, but because we wanted to humble ourselves before the Lord and become better people as a result.
So there is the book. One Question Remains. It says bigger crimes were committed than breaking a window or trespassing on January the 6th, 2021. There was an entrapment, subterfuge, murder, and deception on a grand scale that very few present that day could comprehend of how enormous of a lobster trap that event was arranged to be. Furthermore, it must be addressed that January the 6th is not an isolated event, and that in itself speaks volumes because it wasn't an isolated event. It
Not at
continued
all.
to happen, and it continues to happen. The other
Yep.
day, a few days back, Hillary Clinton and George Soros both received and tarnished the Medal of Freedom. What are your comments when you know what you're fighting for in this country, and yet you see two people who absolutely should receive the antithesis of the medal that they received get such, held in such high esteem and be put in the history books when we know their dark secrets, we know their past, we know what they've done, we know who paid Christopher Steele, we know what the plan was. It's not
Yep.
even disputed. We know that George Soros worked for the Nazis. He was
Yep.
he was actually documenting the loot, the war, the loot taken from the Jewish people, stolen from the people by the Nazis. He was documenting. That was his job. So, I feel that you and your cohorts and the people that were there that day fighting for freedom are much more deserving of the Medal of Freedom than George Soros, who funds Antifa and pays people to riot and
Yep.
funds initiatives to tear down our country. What say you?
I would say that it's a good thing that my God tells me that I'm storing up treasure in heaven. They can keep their medal. I know where I'm going when this is over with, and I'll have deserved when I get up there.
And what message do you have for people that would say want to get involved or want to step up and take a stand, but they see what you've gone through and they're a little bit timid because that was the idea, right? You were the example they were trying to set to make other people sit down and be quiet. So what would you tell those people having gone through it?
I would say, our source of strength is in the word. I would say to educate yourselves. I would say to look back in history and to remind yourselves about the bravery that was shown in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, in our founding fathers. Whether or not you believe that World War II was a righteous war or not, look at the men that stormed, the Point du Hoc. You know what I mean? That's where my Ranger lineage comes from. So what I would say is find your motivation in the scripture or in text, and then emulate it as best as you can. Find your spiritual gift and go to work.
And I got two more questions for you, and they'll go in this order. If you could say something to Donald Trump right now, what would you say to him?
Keep moving forward. You're making me proud.
And having gone through everything that you've gone through, would you do what you did again, knowing this waited for you?
Well, as I sit here today, I know that I needed to. I know that I'm right where I'm supposed to. And I know that so many people got involved because of what happened to me. So it's been an honor. I'm a better person because of it. Our nation is going to be better because of it. January 6th might have been the shot of adrenaline that America and the MAGA movement needed to remind them that this is personal.
Yeah.
So, and like it says in Genesis 50, where what they intended for evil, God always intended for good.
And
And
it also
so,
reminds me of that scripture where it says it's a privilege essentially to take the same stripes that my Lord and Savior did.
without a
So,
doubt,
thank you so much for taking the time. Good luck on the book. One question remains, folks. It's available on Amazon. You can go get it. The link is going to be in the show notes. If you look in the description, the link is there. You will next week see Nate Cain sitting in my seat. And also don't forget to tune into the Woke Detox on Saturday morning. We're going to be doing the Woke Detox and reminding people not just what's going wrong in this country and the chaos that's happening in it, but also why we're doing what we're doing. Our family, God, freedom, liberty, and the
remember what's on the line.
exactly. And we can get caught up in the minutia, the chaos, and all of the other
The
details.
comfort, the comfort.
Exactly. If you are not receiving some type of pushback, if you're not being put down, if you're not encountering any opposition to what you're doing, you're probably doing it wrong.
You're wasting your talent.
Yeah, you're doing
There's
it.
a reason why that parable is in the Bible. The one who just buried his talent, the master said, because you wasted what I gave you,
Yeah.
I'm going to throw you out where there is gnashing of teeth. And that's synonymous with hell. So
took that talent from him and gave it to the guy he gave 10 talents to add to his tally. So guys, God has gifted every one of us with something. Your quest in life is to find out what that is and to put it to good use, because when he comes back, he expects a return on the investment that he put in you. So before we get out of here, do you have any parting words?
Just thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and your audience. I'm looking forward to going to work with you side by side to rescue this sinking ship. We can save this. It just takes that courage. And let's make America great again. Let's do this, because we can and we will.
Absolutely right. So we will also be, I want to remind everybody, we will be at CPAC February 17th to the 22nd. We will be streaming live on Radio Row, so you'll see that broadcast coming. Also, I will be heading to the Capitol on the 17th and returning on the 21st. So we will be down there hobnobbing with all of the Patriots that show up on that historic day when Donald Trump is sworn in as the 47th president. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch. And as I always say, the silent majority, you need to stop being silent and stand your ground, because evil will never retreat willingly. Amen. It must, in every case, be beaten back. Have a great night.
Raise some Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.